In the second year after our divorce, Louis committed suicide upon learning of my remarriage. He burned down his home, destroying everything inside. All that remained was the snowflake specimen he had personally crafted during his Antarctic expedition. It was then that I first noticed the densely packed words etched onto the specimen, wishing my beloved peace and happiness. Yet, for 3 years, I had tormented him relentlessly. In the blink of an eye, I was back on the day he gave me that specimen. Louis was a student sponsored by my dad, who had risen from a small town to attend the University of California and eventually become my dad's PhD student. He was silent, introverted, sensitive, and brilliant. But I loathed him, hated how he made me look like a lazy, undisciplined child. My dad treated him far better than he treated me. Later, when Louis suffered an accident that left him with a limp, my dad, feeling sorry for him, forced me to marry him. For the 3 years of our marriage that followed, I hurled vicious words at him daily, and we mutually despised each other. Yet, he maintained the facade of a good husband, showing me the utmost tolerance and patience, never uttering a single excessive word to me. Later, I took pleasure in tormenting him, knowing his leg was weak, and making him run to the supermarket 3 blocks away in the freezing cold to buy me strawberries. Whenever the wind howled and the rain poured, and his leg injury flared up, leaving him writhing in pain, I would stand by, watching him with cold indifference. Sometimes, walking alongside him, I would deliberately quicken my pace, leaving him trailing behind. Then, I would watch his painful gait with smug satisfaction, taunting him for being a slow, limping cripple. I admit, these were all despicable tactics I used to fight against this marriage. Later, Louis finally agreed to divorce me in the 3rd year of our marriage. I always believed that divorce was a relief for both of us. After all, he didn't really love me that much. But I never expected that, in the 2nd year after our divorce, he would choose to commit suicide upon hearing the news of my remarriage. In a daze, Louis was standing before me again, carefully holding a small box. That year on Christmas Eve, my dad, knowing he was all alone, invited him home for dinner. He was well-behaved and courteous, and brought gifts for everyone in the family. For me, it was a snowflake specimen brought back from the Antarctic expedition. A perfect, star-shaped snowflake, its crystal edges clear and smooth, looking like a transparent star under the light. Making such a specimen requires great patience and attention to detail, and finding such a perfect star-shaped snowflake is even more difficult. In my previous life, after receiving the gift, I casually threw it into the trash. Because I hated Louis, hated how he always hypocritically pleased my family, so I hated everything he gave me. But for some reason, in this life, remembering his death, my heart began to suffocate. A numb, dull pain swept through my body, and a faint ache seemed to throb deep within my heart. I subconsciously took the box and said, "Thank you." My brother Mark flipped through a set of notes that Louis had given him, his eyes full of disdain. "Just a few lousy books. How embarrassing of you to give them as a gift." My dad slapped Mark on the head. "What nonsense are you talking about, you little brat? Those are top students' notes. You can't buy this with money. Go back and study hard." After finishing, he glared at me fiercely. "I'd be worry-free if you two were even half as good as Louis." My brother also hated him, always feeling that he had stolen his thunder as a son. However, Mark was a natural idiot. In his previous life, he didn't study well, and later got a job in the university's logistics department through Dad's connections. He often caused trouble, and Louis was always the one who cleaned up his messes. And I, to rebel against my dad, didn't want to inherit his business, secretly went to study medicine, which my dad always deeply regretted. No wonder my dad liked Louis so much. He wanted to wholeheartedly train Louis as his successor. Who wouldn't like someone who is smart, sensible, and obedient? The taste of this dinner was strange. When Louis got up, I subconsciously looked at his leg. Oh, right, he wasn't limping yet at this time. The muscles under the thin sweatpants were faintly visible. The pants were a little short, revealing his distinctly defined ankle bones when he sat down. Louis shrank his feet a little uncomfortably. It was then that I noticed there was a big hole in his sock. He gritted his teeth and said in a low voice, "Have you looked enough?" Louis's ears were flushed red. He thought I was laughing at him, and he was a little embarrassed and angry. I looked away, then casually got up and went to Mark's room to find 2 pairs of new socks. When Louis was about to leave, I secretly stuffed them into his bag. My dad is a careless person. He usually cares about Louis and often buys him clothes, but he doesn't know to buy some clothes for himself. Back in the room, I opened the gift. At this time, the snowflake specimen did not yet have the blessing he wrote to me. It should have been secretly engraved after we got married in the previous life. I really couldn't figure it out, clearly full of resentment. Why was he still so deeply in love? But now that I've been given a chance to start over, I must change my destiny. In my previous life, after Louis had an accident and became lame, my dad was worried that he would be lonely to death, so he forced me to marry him. The next day, it snowed heavily in the city. After work, I went to school to find my dad. I happened to run into Louis coming out of the laboratory. He was wearing very thin clothes and almost fell while going down the stairs. He almost scared me to death. "Your legs, you must never have anything happen to them again." Actually, I intended to go over and help him, but I didn't expect that I would fall down in my hurry and knock him to the ground. I kicked him 4 or 5 meters away with one foot. Louis turned his head to look at me in disbelief. "I'm sorry." I wanted to get up from the ground, but I found a box of men's underwear falling out of my bag. Louis's eyes cooled down all of a sudden. "Selena, this is school. Don't go too far." I admit that I do have a lot of hooligan-like behavior, such as pursuing Ethan in their laboratory before. Occasionally, I also secretly watch the group of male college students playing basketball in the small forest, appreciating their muscular lines. But that's all. There's nothing else out of line. I struggled to get up from the ground. "For you." His face flushed. "I don't want it. This underwear was stolen from Mark's room. Don't worry, it's clean and brand new. No one has ever worn it." I forced it into his arms, and he blushed and pushed me away. "I really don't need it." "Don't be shy. It's nothing. My dad always buys you things, doesn't he?" Someone passed by on the side of the road and looked at us. Louis leaned to the side awkwardly to block me, his suppressed voice full of surging emotions. "This underwear is too small. It's not my size." I thought about Mark's thin figure and subconsciously looked at his lower body. "Well, it does seem to be small." "Then wait for me. I'll steal my dad's for you later." I turned to leave, but Louis grabbed my arm. "Selena, stop teasing me." Louis's fair and smooth face was a bit ashamed and indignant, and his frozen red knuckles were clasped on my wrist. I took off my gloves and put them on him. "I just want to atone for my sins." After all, in my previous life, my actions indirectly led to his suicide. I remembered that on the 7th day after his death in the previous life, a student came to pray for him and loudly questioned me in the funeral home about why I was so cruel. That was the first graduate student Louis had taught after becoming a professor. The other party burst into tears in the funeral home, saying that I was a heartless and unfeeling bad woman. "Professor loved you so much that he even wrote a will leaving all his possessions to you before he died, fearing that you would have a hard time in the future. He only committed suicide with peace of mind after watching you announce your marriage and have a home. Don't you know that at all? Professor Louis has suffered from depression for many years, and it's all because of you." A few words kept swirling in my ears, and my thoughts instantly pulled me back to reality. At this time, Louis stood in front of me, lowering his eyes, wondering what he was thinking. Could it be that he started to love me from this time on? I tentatively asked carefully, "Louis, do you like?" Before I could finish speaking, Ethan came out of the laboratory. He waved to me excitedly from afar. Louis's eyes, which had been somewhat tender, immediately turned cold. "I won't bother you two chatting. I'll leave first." After saying that, he left without looking back. "Selena, what are you doing here? Do you want to go to a movie together? Or let's go shopping this afternoon. Haven't you always said you wanted to buy a necklace?" I didn't have much patience and sent him away. "I'm not going. I'm not in the mood." Ethan curled his lips and said, "Did my senior say something he shouldn't have said again?" "Don't pay attention to him. He's just very serious and silent." Maybe he's been busy preparing for the Antarctic expedition recently and he's in a bad mood. Yes, I remembered. In my previous life, Lewis had an accident during this Antarctic expedition. During that Antarctic expedition, I, as part of the medical team accompanying the research team, encountered an avalanche at the same time. Although everyone was rescued in the end, Lewis's leg was left with a disability and he could no longer walk normally after that. So, in this life, I must ensure his safety before the disaster occurs. Ethan waved his hand in front of me. Selena, do you have something on your mind? It's nothing. I'll leave first. On the day the research team set off, Lewis was wearing only a thin outfit in addition to his basic protective suit. I stuffed a thick bag of hand warmers into his hands. Use these to keep warm. Ethan, sitting in the back, saw it and said with a grievance, Selena, I want some too. I looked at him dressed like Buzz Lightyear and refused. You're wearing so much. How could you be cold? Turning my head, I saw a hint of a smile flashing in Lewis's eyes in the reflection of the bus window. But soon, he restrained his expression and pretended that nothing had happened. On the third day, we arrived at the expedition camp. At night, I sneaked into Lewis's room. Here are some knee pads and some personal items. Take them and use them. Don't worry, this time they're all your size. As the research team's helicopter blades churned up snow and mist, Selena's fingers, clutching the knee pads, nearly pierced her palm. Lewis stood at the front of the team, his eyelashes, frosted with white, visible beneath his goggles. His thin figure seemed fragile amidst the silvery white landscape. In her previous life, he had been buried by a blizzard here, his kneecap shattered to dust, while she was holed up in the medical bay complaining about the poor signal in Antarctica. Selena, what are you spacing out for? Ethan poked her in the waist. Help me calibrate the weather radar. His nose was red with cold, making him look like a cartoon character. Selena turned and caught sight of Lewis sorting core samples, the knee brace on his left leg, which she'd secretly slipped into his luggage last night, was a perfect fit, down to the millimeter. The result of her poring over his past medical reports late into the night. As night fell, the blizzard arrived as predicted. Selena stayed glued to the radio, listening to the coordinates radioed back by the expedition team. Suddenly, Lewis's voice crackled through the static. Ice fissure widening in Sector B, coordinates south 78 degrees 23 minutes. His panting mingled with the sound of wind and snow. Everyone evacuate, I'll cover the rear. No way. Selena practically screamed the words, grabbing a first aid kit and rushing outside. Ethan shouted after her, Are you crazy? You'll die going out in this weather. But she was already wading through knee-deep snow, her headlamp cutting through the swirling white chaos, revealing a shadowy, swaying black figure in the distance. Lewis. As Selena lunged forward, she saw him using an ice axe to secure a rope, the knee brace on his left leg already split. The roar of an avalanche rumbled in from the distance, like the growl of some prehistoric beast. He turned and saw her, his pupils shrinking in shock. Who told you to come? Get out of here. We're going together. Selena grabbed his arm, but he shoved her away with a force that nearly sent her sprawling. The ice beneath her feet creaked ominously. Suddenly, he bent down and hoisted her onto his shoulder, staggering and stumbling up the snow-covered slope. Behind them, the ice wall collapsed with a deafening crash, a wave of snow and ice slamming into her back. The pain blurred her vision, but she could still feel the tremor in his arms, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of suppressing his own agony. They made it back to the expedition camp before dawn, Lewis's left knee swollen and unable to bend. In the warm glow of the medical bay, he gritted his teeth as she treated his wound, sweat dripping from his chin and staining the sheets with dark blooms. Why did you come? He said suddenly, his voice as rough as sandpaper. You should hate me. Selena hesitated, her iodine swab hovering over his knee. I owe you. He gave a self-deprecating laugh, but fell silent as he saw the redness in her eyes. The light from the snow outside painted his face, highlighting the sharp angles of his profile, a face she had mocked countless times as stuffy, but that now was etched with a tenderness and pain she had never seen before. For the next 3 days, Louis was forced to stay at the expedition camp to recover. Using the excuse of observing his recovery, Selena moved into his tent. Late at night, while she was on watch, he always pretended to sleep with his back to her. But Selena, in the faint glow of the emergency lamp, would steal glances at him as he slept. He always curled up his left knee and crossed his arms over his chest, like a snail ready to retreat into its shell. "Can't sleep?" His voice broke the silence, startling Selena and nearly causing her to spill her thermos of hot cocoa. Moonlight streamed through the cracks in the tent, casting a silver sheen on his eyelashes. Selena offered him the cocoa, touching the tips of his fingers. They were colder than the Antarctic ice. "I was thinking about the avalanche." Selena stared at the bandage on his knee. "You could have run first." He was silent for a long time, his fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I thought you'd be happy." "What?" "That I died, so you wouldn't have to be forced by your father to marry a cripple." His tone was terribly calm, as if he were discussing the weather for the next day. "In our previous life, weren't you always hoping I would die?" Selena suddenly remembered the researcher's wails at the funeral home. So he knew everything, knew all her hatred and torment, yet still left everything to her in his will. "I'm sorry." The words caught in her throat like a rusty shard of metal. "Back then, don't explain." He cut her off, his voice filled with weary resignation. "I know you were just trying to escape your father's control. Actually, He suddenly stopped, turning his head to look at the glacier outside the tent. After that day, the atmosphere between them became delicate. Louis began to actively share research data with Selena, even teaching her to identify snowflake specimen of different shapes. One starry night, he pointed to the aurora borealis streaking across the sky. "Look," he said, "doesn't that look like the math formulas you hate?" Selena laughed, but as he turned, she saw a flash of tenderness in his eyes, a look she had never seen before, as if the aurora had shattered and scattered within them. On the last night before the end of the Antarctic expedition, Selena found a note tucked into his notebook. The writing, pressed hard into the paper, was a sentence that had been repeatedly smudged and rewritten. "I shouldn't have fallen in love with you, but when snow landed in your hair, I heard my heart freeze over." On the return cruise, Louis's leg injury had improved considerably. On deck, he leaned against the railing watching dolphins leap from the sea, his windbreaker flapping in the breeze. Selena approached with a thermos of warm milk tea, suddenly noticing the faint red marks on his neck, the finger marks she had left during the avalanche, now resembling a gentle kiss. "What are you thinking about?" Selena's voice startled a seagull into flight. He turned his head and gave her a faint smile. "I was thinking that the snow in Antarctica, when it melts, tastes salty." Selena paused, suddenly realizing that he was referring to the salt water she had once thrown in his face, a way she had vented her anger in their previous life. "Louis, Selena, come here." Ethan's shout interrupted her. He came running up to them, holding a phone. On the screen was a call from her father. The moment Selena took the phone, she heard his familiar, authoritarian voice on the other end. "It's time to set a date for you and Louis to have a wedding." The phone felt hot in her hand. Selena saw Louis turn and walk toward the ship's cabin. Suddenly, she blurted out, "Dad, I don't want to get married." She heard the sound of a glass breaking on the other end of the line. And as she watched Louis's retreating figure, she felt a sense of relief for the first time. Amidst the sound of the cruise ship slicing through the waves, she heard her own heart beating faster, not in defiance of her father, but in response to some unknown emotion. That night, Selena found Louis on deck, slightly drunk. He was leaning against a lifeboat, his eyes glazed over. "You know," he said, "the first time I saw you, you were dancing in the garden wearing a red dress. I thought to myself, a girl like that shouldn't be locked in a cage." "Louis." Selena reached out and steadied his swaying shoulder, but he turned and grasped her wrist. His palm was calloused from years of gripping an ice axe, but now it felt like a feather brushing against the back of her hand. "Selena, I love you." His voice was laced with the sea breeze. "I've loved you since long, long ago. So even if you hate me, torture me, I'm willing." He laughed suddenly, his laughter tinged with bitterness. Pathetic, isn't it? But I can't control it. Selena stood on her toes and silenced him with a kiss. In the salty sea air, she tasted the bitterness on his lips, the bitterness of years of unrequited love. He stiffened at first, then wrapped his arms around her, as if trying to absorb her into his very being. In the distance, the midnight bells chimed, and a new day was rising on the horizon. 3 months later, Louis's leg had completely healed. They were in the laboratory, making new snowflake specimen, when he suddenly took her hand and slipped a silver ring onto her ring finger. "This is made from Antarctic ice crystals," he said. "Consider it an early engagement gift." Selena laughed and threw herself into his arms, inhaling the faint scent of cedar on his clothes. Maple leaves were falling outside the window, and their story was finally beginning anew in this autumn season. One weekend afternoon, Selena was sorting through old belongings when she discovered a notebook that Louis had hidden deep in his bookshelf. The most recent page read, "She asked me why I was willing to be tormented for 3 years. I said it was because, back then, I was willing to endure hell, as long as I could stay by her side. Now I know that the only thing that separates heaven and hell is her smile." Selena closed the notebook and looked toward the figure in the kitchen, brewing coffee. Sunlight streamed through the gauze curtains, weaving a golden web on his hair. The ice and snow of their previous life had melted away, and this time, Selena had finally found her own spring in the snow country. Suddenly, Selena's phone vibrated. It was a message from Ethan. "Selena, Senior can actually smile. The whole laboratory is betting on when you guys will have a wedding." Selena looked up at Louis, who happened to turn around. Their eyes met, and they both smiled at the same time. The sunlight outside the window was perfect, like the never-melting stars of Antarctica. And this time, Selena finally understood the most tender confession hidden within the snowflake specimen.